Hello again to another episode of 5 W's and an Age of Doing a PhD with me, Dr. Nobulali Tangazele. Very excited about today's episode because it looks at where to do your PhD. And this is part of the 5 W's. So I did my PhD at the University of Warwick, and this was by absolute fluke. I would love to say I had a 5 year goal and it was all really planned. No. The only thing that I knew for sure is that I want to do a PhD in the United Kingdom. And this was because I had been to the United Kingdom. I'll say the UK. The United Kingdom, it sounds like the name and the surname of the place. But I had been to the UK in 2008 on a travel bursary known as the A. Bailey Travel Bursary, and it gave me an opportunity to explore the United Kingdom's length and breadth. And I got to see like your Oxford University, your Cambridge University, and understand how the systems work, but also had an opportunity to meet students that were studying there and have conversations with them. So, how I chose Warwick or how Warwick chose me is because I was attending a conference where my then to be supervisor was actually giving a talk, and there was a beautiful partnership that had just been formed within the university where they were partnering with the Royal Shakespeare Company, the Warwick Business School, as well as my supervisor starting a department within the business school that was looking for humanities students, specifically ones with a drama background, specifically applied theater, to come into the business school and essentially use that skill in the dramas in the business school as a pedagogical tool. So there was a meeting of like so many things that were interdisciplinary and also aligned to my undergrad, aligned to where I also wanted to go to. So it was a perfect marriage, I suppose, between myself, the university, and my supervisor. But when I got to Warwick, I learned something about the university that I didn't know. And this was the fact that Warwick was one of the 20 Russell Group universities. A Russell Group university is similar to the Ivy League university or the equivalent of Ivy Leagues in America. And I did not go into Warwick knowing this, but that became something that I learned whilst I was a student, which is actually extremely valuable for multiple reasons. So the first thing about going to a Russell Group university is that the university is usually highly ranked, which then means they've got access to quite a lot of funding. They've got an academic staff that is interdisciplinary and multiple disciplines within. But also there's research funding and usually funding available for PhD students. So I got funding from the university because the university is highly ranked and because it had funding that it could allot to PhD topics, and it didn't require for you to slot into a topic that already exists for my department. But I do know like a lot of people that were doing finance PhDs, the supervisor would determine what their topic is because they would be running like a research lab that is focusing on a certain topic, and each person slots into a certain topic within that. So that being said, I've only taught as a lecturer and a guest lecturer at Russell Group universities, so I can't necessarily speak back to like what other universities are like. However, the advice that I would give to a person looking to do a PhD is don't necessarily go to the university that is the most highly ranked broadly, right? But rather go to the universities that are highly ranked in the area that you want to specialize in. What I mean by this is Warwick Business School. Okay, Warwick University is, I think at the time was like in the top 10, and then Warwick Business School was in like the top 5 or the top 8 when I registered, and it stayed within the top 10 for the whole time during um, my PhD. That being said, I was also a sessional lecturer at Queen Mary University of London, and being exposed to two, which has a lower ranking than Warwick. But what I experienced at Queen Mary was that it had a completely different culture to Warwick Business School. At Warwick, because of the pressure of being at the top, there were a lot of KPIs that were associated with what PhD students and our lecturers needed to do that were geared towards making sure that we stay in the rankings, but also pushing one to be fundamentally like an academic. And I was coming in from a practice orientated background and knew that I would potentially go into academia, but I wasn't 100% sure. So it was really important for me to understand what people that are also, highly linked to industry are doing, and how a life of dabbling between academia as well as practice looks like. And this is what I loved about lecturing at Queen Mary University of London, and there I was also lecturing in two departments. So I was lecturing in the School of Drama and English, where I was teaching fourth year university or honors, third year university students that are going into honors on a topic that looks at London performance now. So how a multinational practitioner needs to understand the different plays that are available, and why having a palette of an understanding of theater from multiple countries can help you develop your own voice and develop your own style, and also how you want to contribute to the industry, but also some of the challenges thereof. And then on the other hand, I was lecturing at the business school, where I was doing management theory, and there I was lecturing first years, and we were looking at like an introductory course on the different management theorists, who they are, and how they informed business management as a whole. So with this being the case, I was able to pull together, I suppose, in the United Kingdom, 3 case studies. Actually 4, because I would guest lecture in the drama department at Warwick as well. And there I was lecturing at master's level and looking at applied theatre. And I guess these 4 departments, so the business school at Warwick, the business school at Queen Mary, the business school at the Department of Drama and English at Queen Mary, as well as the Department of Drama at Warwick, allowed me to see the similarities as well as the differences between the universities. And the drama departments were quite similar. I think people that study drama, people that lecture drama, are similar in that there is a very ensemble approach, a community-focused approach, a smaller groups of students as well, and a laboratory approach to working together. So there I got to know my colleagues extremely well. And what I mean by that is I'd go for dinners with colleagues at their homes. I'd talk to them. We'd discuss my research, and we'd have opportunities to really get to know each other outside of the professional side of things. Whereas within the business school, in my group, I got to know people extremely well. But then within the broader business school, I think my curiosity and being on the PhD program allowed for me to dabble into different areas. And because of my curiosity and my interest in interdisciplinary approaches to working, I got to know people in the behavioral science department, and also got to know people in ops management, and got to do a guest lecture there as well. But I got to get a sense of what the ecosystem of the business school looks like. So without pulling down or disqualifying anything, I must say that like the cultures were extremely different. And if I was advising someone on where to go, I'd really say like get to know who your supervisor is going to be, because that's a really important relationship, and it's the relationship that will determine whether you make it into second year of the PhD, because your supervisor has to approve your proposal, but also they need to essentially act as a sponsor to your PhD topic, and also be the ones that say, I think Lali is ready to go now into the field or not. And within my business school, my supervisor was very supportive of my work, but also we'd have extremely frank conversations about what is and isn't working. So 2 points to consider when going into a PhD program is, where do you want to be located, and who do you want to be working with? The where is important because this is where you're going to spend a good 4 years of your life if things go according to plan. 3 to 6 years on average. Ideally, you want to finish within 4 years because the funding also stops usually in year three. And then year four, you don't have to pay school fees. So it's really important that it's a place, one, that you like. And also, that said, caveat, you don't actually have to be in the UK full time for you to do your PhD. So I was at Warwick University. I wanted that university because of that partnership between the different organizations, because of my supervisor, because of the department that I was joining, which was this interdisciplinary department. So that was like a area of speciality focus that I had. But also I knew that I would not survive in London. I am an individual that grew up in a fast-paced city. I used to live in Johannesburg in South Africa. Grew up in Soweto, very fast paced. Lived in Berea, very fast paced. Lived in Forest Hill, very fast paced. And during these times, I realized that I am most productive when I'm in a very slow paced environment where there's a lot of greenery, but also where there aren't a lot of distractions. So, London for me, whenever I'd go visit, whenever I'd go work, I felt like there were a lot of distractions, whether it's theater productions, opportunities to work with people, freelance work. And I'm the type of person that it's either I'm all in or I can't necessarily focus on something and finish it. So I also knew that wherever it is that I study, I want to live on campus. So Warwick also had an opportunity and facility for me to be able to stay on campus, which meant that I then become like a fully immersed PhD student. I resigned from my company, handed it over to somebody else. I left South Africa, stopped accepting any consulting gigs, stopped accepting any working acting work until like I had stabilized and decided that I'm essentially going to become extremely recluse so that I can immerse myself in this new theory because I was going into a new faculty. So I was moving from humanities to social science, but also I was moving from drama to business school, and I was moving from applied theater as a topic to apply to strategy as practice. So the odds were really stacked up against me, and I needed to make sure that I give myself enough time to immerse myself in the world that I'm essentially an apprentice of, and also in the community that I'm trying to build whilst doing my PhD. So that was Warwick Business School. That being said, I heard of how I'd see how, for example, at Queen Mary, they approach community and simple things like hierarchy. At the Warwick Business School, if you wanted to speak to the dean, you had to speak to the PA. The PA would then ask you if you've spoken to your head of department. Your head of department would then ask, like, is it something that you need to talk to them directly as the dean, or if they can sort it out for you. Whereas at Queen Mary, I found that you could just go into the dean's office, have a conversation with her. She'd engage with you and really had like a leadership style that was very accessible, whereas at Warwick, because of how busy the dean gets and how the business side of the school is really as important as the pedagogical side. They would be in quite a lot of committee meetings and things like that. And why does that matter? I don't know. Well, for me, being able to access leadership, being able to talk to the people that are making decisions on our behalf as the student body was something that was extremely important to me because their vision and their mission and their objectives were informing my curriculum. They were informing the funding that I had. They were informing the types of journal that they wanted us to publish in and the number of journal articles that they wanted us to have. So it was really important to understand and have access to those people. But also they gave me like an opportunity to envision, like, would I want to be a full-time academic if that essentially becomes a place where I can then have like influence? Would I want to be the dean of a business school or not? So I guess being at Warwick allowed me to see what the business side of academia looks like, and being at Queen Mary allowed me to see what the community side of being in a business school looks like. Another university that I was exposed to whilst doing my PhD is King's College, London, and they had a completely different model. So there, unlike Warwick, where there's like a lot of different groups. Okay, so how Warwick works is they've got like the business school, and then under the business school, they've got different groups. So if, for example, you are with the strategy group, you'd most probably be doing a PhD in strategy. If you are in the behavioral science group, you're doing a PhD in behavioral science. That's where your supervisor will be. That's where your brown box conversations will be. That's where, like, when you go to conferences, you choose topics that are in that area. So it's very siloed in how it approaches things. Then I visited King's College, where I had an amazing team of gentlemen who became collaborators. They were individuals that were using like an ensemble approach to working. So the department was one of ethnomethodologists. So as opposed to being a group that is orientated around just like topics, they were more focused on like a certain approach to analyzing data. They worked mostly with video data, and how they worked, which was very interesting, is they were almost like this unit that worked as an ensemble, and as opposed to PhD students having a supervisor, they would be supervised by one person that is like, okay, you always have two supervisors, your first and your second supervisor, but your first supervisor is essentially like indongainche, like that's where the buck stops. But your second supervisor would be like a pastoral supervisor that plays a supportive role. But what I found at King's College is you could actually speak to the entire team about your topic. They would all advise, and then when it goes granular, then your supervisor would say, well, having taken what this person said and that person said and that person said, maybe focus on this area or focus on that area. So I remember thinking, if I could go back and do my topic again, knowing what I know now, I'd most probably choose Warwick because of the facilities, because of just like the breadth of scholars that you find within the university, because of the level of exceptional like excellence when it comes to where they pitch things, resources, um, funding. Like, yeah, we were very well resourced, and well supported. Then when it comes to like really immersing yourself in a community of practice, especially with scholars that are immersed in practice and academia, I would have said go to like Queen Mary, because it's extremely supportive in its nature, but also very, how does what you're doing in your PhD impact practice? And maybe these were my colleagues that I was around. Some might be like, nope, that's not my experience, but that was my experience. I had a colleague who I reported to that was conducting research and was interviewing 80 CEOs, specifically females, looking at how women as leaders lead differently to men, and like some of the qualities that they possess that can inform management theory, specifically within the women's sector. And how she just went about doing that was very like theoretical and practice orientated. And she was consulting whilst lecturing, whereas at Warwick, it's not necessarily that big or that like open, that people will talk about like what they're doing as consultants, and it's more really like we're academics. Then when it comes to King's College, it was also mostly academic, but they were really focused on like the method. How do you refine your method? How do you contribute? How do you answer questions that are very micro, very granular, and very specialized? And also, how do you become extremely exceptional in your methodology? So it's almost like here you become an exceptional scholar, here you become an exceptional consultant and scholar, and here you become an exceptional researcher, in your method. And then there's Gibbs. And I'd like to bring this, even though I wasn't a student at the Gordon Institute of Business Science, where I'm currently a lecturer, they have a completely different model to all of these. They are also based in the global south, a university that is on the African continent, specifically based in South Africa, but they've got students from all over the continent, and they've got a slightly different model. So, firstly, the proposal writing phase is extremely vigorous, whereas at Warwick, like you write your proposal almost in isolation. At Gibbs, what I found is you write your proposal as part of a community. So you become part of like the cohort of, let's say, 2020. first year students, and all of you go through modules. We did this at Warwick as well. All of you go through modules, all of you write your proposals, but all your proposals are read by by a committee that basically comes together and evaluates the quality of the spectrum of PhDs, whereas at Warwick it's within your department. So what you find there is when you are presenting your proposal, you've got someone from strategy, you've got someone from HR, you've got somebody from ops, you've got somebody from entrepreneurship saying the phenomena you're talking about in entrepreneurship is actually this. Are you sure that it's strategy that you're talking about, or is it more entrepreneurial theory? And then someone else says, no, actually, the same thing we've got in HR, and there's a special publication or a special issue that came out in 2022 that speaks about X, Y, and Z. Is it actually this phenomena, which is a very collectivist approach to doing a PhD? And I know, like, the higher you go, the more individualistic it becomes. But it was very interesting to see, as a supervisor to a doctoral candidate, how even though I am their second supervisor, the first supervisor and I have a very close relationship, but also the committee that informs what it is that they eventually decide to do has got a very hands-on approach. And there's someone that's also got a pastoral role from the doctoral program that actually influences what it is that they do and informs their process as well. Look, I'm new to it, so I'm not extremely well versed in it, but it's almost like each university has got a very different approach to doing things, and it took some time to get a sense of what it is that they do and how they do it. But also it made me realize that there is no singular approach to doing a PhD, and no two institutions are identical. So it really is almost like a dating or a matchmaking exercise where you need to find the university that aligns to where you want to be placed geographically, where you want to be placed as a scholar, the supervisor that you want to work with, and then the topic that you want to focus on, and then the impact, and then what you want to do post your PhD. Because if you want to become an academic and be very theory orientated, then you need to find a stream that aligns with that. If you want to become a practitioner, and potentially consult, you need to find a stream that does that. If you want to become a specialist in a specific method, then you have to find a stream that does that. But the rankings don't necessarily tell you that. Being in a Russell Group university doesn't necessarily tell you that. So that's like the way aspect of like which university, department, supervisor, topic you want to choose. Another one that's really important is the actual geographical location. I already alluded to this about me not wanting to be in London. So that was like a given. I don't want to be in London. I looked at Oxford. I looked at Cambridge as well. But I just felt there wasn't a cultural fit with those two universities for me. And there are students that really thrived in those environments. But having visited both, I felt like it was too far removed from being in South Africa, and also too secluded. And then the topic that I wanted to do wasn't easily fitting into anybody's topic, because there was someone there, Richard Whittington, who specializes in strategy as practice. But then I guess I could have done my PhD under his supervision. Yeah, it was also like a timing thing, I suppose, and also like that mixed within Warwick. So I think Warwick ended up being the best place for me. It allowed me to grow. It allowed me to explore my entrepreneurial side as well. But also I got to start like a film club whilst I was there. I got to co-direct Shakespeare plays that were funded by the dean within the business school, which are not things that I saw at Queen Mary or like King's College or Oxford or Cambridge. So there was a very big appreciation for the arts that I saw at Warwick, which does have the biggest arts center in the whole country, if I'm not mistaken. I want to say in the United Kingdom, but I stand to be corrected. But also, like, Warwick is well positioned. It's not that far from Oxford. It's not that far from London. It's not that far from Birmingham. You take a train and you get to Scotland. But also like the extracurricular activities. It's got an amazing sports center. So whilst I was at Warwick, I got to improve my swimming, and they subsidized that. I paid £30 for 10 lessons. So it's like £3 a lesson. I got to improve my golf because there's a beautiful golf course, or golf club, country club, in Warwick. So I got to improve my golf. There was horse riding lessons. There were just like so many things that like appealed to me that were in the countryside that I could do outside of being a PhD student that allowed me to unwind. I joined karate at some point in time. I was very explorative, because I felt like this is an opportunity for me to relive my student years, but also an opportunity for me to find sports that I wouldn't necessarily do and extracurricular activities that I wouldn't necessarily do. There was an amazing TEDx talk, that the students run. There were amazing societies as well. I didn't really get into the societies because they are very time consuming, and I was traveling a lot for my data collection. So that's another thing about where to do your PhD. What extracurricular activities do you want to do? Then there's the funding and the cost of living. One of the reasons why I didn't want to live in London is because London is expensive, guys. London is so expensive. So this apartment that I live in was a 3-bedroom apartment. Now it's a 2-bedroom apartment with a dining room. I'm pointing because this wall was broken down and made into a dining room and a lounge. And this apartment for me costs about £800. And when I moved in initially, it was £750. And my landlady only took up the rent, like now that there's like fuel increase and things like that. And in Akona, she increased it initially by like, well, she's increased it in total by £50, which is not allowed. I know a friend who's got a smaller apartment and it's 2-bedroom and she's paying £2,500, and her apartment is much smaller than mine. So the cost of living is lower, but also like the bus system is very easy to use. You've got a lot of options when it comes to things that you want to do on the weekend. For example, I've got an allotment now here in Birmingham, which is like a big piece of land that I can do gardening on. I've got dance classes that are 12 minutes away. I attend church that is 12 minutes away. The train station is 12 minutes away because town is 12 minutes away. So things are not too far, but also as a person who is of ethnic minority and a person of color, I lived in Leamington Spa, I lived in Coventry, I lived in Warwick, I lived in Cheltenham Spa, and I have found Birmingham to be the nicest city to be in because I can get my hair done. There's a lot of people that look like me, but also you've got like a very diverse age group and a very diverse community of people. I had an 83-year-old friend, Peter, may his soul rest in peace, that I could go and play dominoes with. But also I've got like neighbors that are in their 20s and neighbors that are in their 40s that we go for salsa class dances with. And Coventry and Leamington Spa are student cities, so there's a lot of activities for young people, whereas Cheltenham was a bit more of a mature group and a mature crowd and very, very vanilla. And I really struggled there as a person of color because whilst I'm very cosmopolitan, sometimes you just want to be like, eat certain type of food or get your hair done or have an opportunity to just, have a conversation with people that might understand some of the challenges that you have as an immigrant. And I've found the community in Birmingham to be a lot better. I've also been exposed to the University of Birmingham, but there I just use the library. I haven't lectured there. I look forward to potentially doing so maybe next year, or should the opportunity arise. But essentially, it's another university that I'd like to explore and maybe later on do like this is what the different universities look like. So I'll stop there when it comes to where you need to consider or the things you need to consider when thinking about where to do your PhD. And to sum up our conversation, it's essentially important that you look at the ranking of the university in the field that you want to specialize in, the location of the university and what the cost of living would be like, the funding that might be available because of the type of university you're going to, and the terms and conditions that come with that funding. The supervisor, I'll speak more broadly about who when it comes to the PhD because they play a very pivotal role as one of your major stakeholders. And then lastly, like, the what are some of the things that that space can afford you as an individual that is holistic, because you only be doing the PhD for 8 to 12 hours a day, at a push, about 60 hours a week, give and take. What do you do with the time that you've got off? What do you do in your extracurricular activities? And what type of relationships do you want to build as well, having finished your PhD? That being said, I did spend about a year of my PhD in South Africa because I was collecting my data there. So if you are a mature student and wanting not to necessarily like immigrate or semigrate to the country where you're doing your PhD, you can also be based at Warwick for like a year when you're doing your first year, when you're doing like the MPhil equivalent. And then the last 3 years, you can actually be anywhere in the world, because anyway, we meet with our supervisors virtually now. So you don't necessarily have to live in the country where you're doing your PhD. That comes to the end of our episode. I hope you've enjoyed the insights. Remember to follow me on Instagram as well as Twitter. I'm at Nobu_Lali on Instagram and at Lali Tangazele on Twitter. And also, get in touch with me via LinkedIn. I'm not very active on LinkedIn, but I do intend to do so. So I hope this has been extremely helpful. It feels like it was a bit of a labyrinth, but it also is like a bit of a journey for you to find where to do your PhD. So I didn't want to present it as like a very linear and easy process. And I also didn't want to give you a very specific Warwick University example. So I thought maybe it's best for me to give a multiple approach to the different examples that I've had because of the exposure that I've had. And I'm going to be guest lecturing at London School of Economics. Very excited about that. So once I've been exposed to that as well, maybe in like a later episode, I can give you the ins and the outs on how LSE works and how it is to essentially engage with them. But I'm very excited, and yeah, I'll see you in the next episode when I'll be discussing who are the key stakeholders when you're doing a PhD, and who do you need to consider as like interlocutors of what it is that you're doing, so that you can have the best community around which to do your PhD, but also to have the support. And I'll be speaking both to your traditional and non-traditional who's, because it involves both my supervisor. But, at some point I had to bring in a psychologist and a psychiatrist and a mentor and another psychologist here in the UK. So I had a team in South Africa and a team in the UK supporting me, because you can't finish the PhD alone. I also had an editor, I had friendly readers, and I'll essentially paint the picture of who it is that basically helps, an individual complete their PhD, and also when these voices come into your journey. Thank you very much for listening. See you in the next episode. Bye.